Hi, all. A very warm welcome to today's yet another Hen YouTube LinkedIn Live. I'm Priyanka Changya, co founder Hen. Hen stands for Her Entrepreneurial Network. It's your go to community for women entrepreneurs to come together to inspire, inform, and support each other in scaling up and growing their business. And today I am here as a parent too. I'm a parent to a 11-year-old girl, and trust me guys, every day is a new challenge, and I'm so delighted to get on a conversation today with none other than Megha Mehta. It would be amazing. Hi, Megha. A very warm welcome to you, Megha. Guys, Megha is a parenting coach. She is ICF ACC certified, and she has worked with she's built a community of more than 80,000 plus parents on Instagram, and her parenting resources are something that has been downloaded by more than 10,000 families. So I know for sure I am today in good hands with asking my questions and my doubts, and I encourage all the parents who are listening in today, guys, please use the chat section, put your comments there. We would try and answer as many questions as we can. On that note, Megha, a very warm welcome to you again. So, guys, on to our subject today. We'll dive right in why parenting feels harder than ever, right? Um, One of the reasons we are in the era that has flown by too quickly. Our childhood was of radios and black and white to colored TVs, and now suddenly we are in the era of AI. And to keep our children in, to bring up our children in the social media, AI, tech savvy world, a lot has changed, right? But we are going to take it bit by bit with Megha today. So, Megha, first and foremost, your 2 cents on parenting on general, right? Like, what can we do as parents, firstly, to raise future ready kids?
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for that. Yeah, it's my honor to be here. I'm really excited to talk to Hen members today, and thank you for the introduction as well. I do what I do because I'm very passionate about children really not being in that place where they feel very difficult, very alone. Because as a teen, I have gone through mental health issues, and that's one of the reasons that drives me. To do this. And of course, I also have two girls, 9 and 14. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. And why is it? So, your question about why is it that we need to think of, raising future ready kids, right? I feel like you just mentioned, we are really in a place where things are going by way too fast. And there's a lot of catching up to do. And while there is this whole section of parents who's worrying about it and who's also, we're talking about like, the anxious generation, that book that went, I think it was super popular with a lot of parents and for good reason. But I also feel like there is a really big need for us to take charge of the situation because I feel like we are the authority figures. We are the ones who really need to have that steady leadership
Hmm.
for our children because the first lens through which they look at the world is us. And if
Hmm.
we create some sort of steadiness within us,
Hmm.
because we understand what's going on and we feel equipped, for
Hmm.
what's coming, then they really borrow that from us. So, I
Hmm.
feel like as parents there is a level of optimism that we are all,
Hmm.
required to have because that's
So,
what creates. Yeah.
hmm. That brings me, Megha, to this entire concept of gentle parenting. As a parent, I'm also juggling. There is this immense amount of guilt you go through if you ever raise your voice, so much so if you scold your child, there is hours of guilt inside you that did I overstep? Will this have an adverse impact on her? And then you're like, TK, we are fine only. And I think we went through much worse. But this whole thing about gentle parenting, then where do you So it's coming more from this, right? So see, studies show that more than 70% of kids, parents are feeling more stressed, and the average screen time has gone so high, and there's just so many things as parents you are dealing with, right? Now, how do you set up boundaries? Like you mentioned, right? You need to be the leader figure, but how do you set up those disciplinary boundaries yet still follow the gentle parent that you are trying to be, gentler parent rather, and
Yeah.
still have the work done without having to repeat yourself like a cuckoo clock all the time, you know?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like gentle parenting is the thing that most parents are struggling with right now. It's a little bit like maybe, nutrition advice when it's coming at you from everywhere and you're like, oh my God, I shouldn't be eating this, I shouldn't be doing this. And you know what? At some point, you realize that if you mindfully eat a meal which may not be the healthiest, you're still probably going to be better off than stressing about eating the right thing, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
gentle parenting के साथ I think a little bit ऐसा ही हुआ है because we've been just thrown a lot of information. So suddenly we are moving from like that very authoritarian, to a gentle, and I
Hmm.
feel like that swing is, I mean, that move, that change is quite
Hmm.
a big one for most of us. And I think we have to be very mindful because some parents I've noticed they're so worried about
Hmm.
this gentle parenting thing and trying to get it right that
Hmm.
they've gone to the other extreme where discipline and boundaries are
Hmm.
not in place. And I'm not sure if all parents have thought about it like this, but gentle parenting has a huge element of the need for discipline and boundaries because that is as much a signal for connection, as much
Hmm.
a signal for safety emotionally to a child, as
Hmm.
is your
Hmm.
validation emotionally, or doing things gentle, the gentle parenting way. It's equally important. And
Hmm.
and the first thing we need to know is that that balance is always going to be needed because as a child, that's
Hmm.
what creates safety for them.
Okay. So, fair enough, creating a safety net, being gentle, but still having boundaries, discipline, right? One of the key things that a lot of tools that I think I have totally, it has never worked for me, but a lot of parents do swear by it, is the routine charts or, the star gradings, etc., right? Sometimes it
Hmm.
works, sometimes it doesn't. So, any other tools or techniques as parents that you can use to ensure that these disciplines, these boundaries that you are trying to set for your child in particular, that you are able to stick to it without, going through the rabbit hole again and again?
Yeah, yeah. Really good question. Yes. Routine charts are, I think, yeah, the
Or
thing that I
chart.
think most parents fall back on, even though, I mean, by the time your child is a teen, you are not even, using any of those, or
Hmm.
it's not working. Um, I feel I encourage parents to really get a little bit more reflective. Okay. I
Hmm.
feel like anything that does not get examined, anything that does not get reflected on, is just going to get repeated.
Hmm.
Okay. And techniques, tips, you can get hundreds of them from
Hmm.
like Google, but the reason it doesn't work is because maybe you haven't taken a moment to reflect. Okay. And when I say reflect, what I'm talking about is noticing if there is a pattern that's going on, and
Okay.
noticing if there is a particular kind of loop that you're stuck in. I'll give you an example. Okay, a very small example of maybe a preteen
Hmm.
who has like this routine chart in the morning, and they're supposed to get ready on time for the
Hmm.
bus without your prompting.
Yeah.
Okay, and you did the routine charts,
Hmm.
and maybe you've done it once, twice, thrice, and your
Hmm.
child still ends up getting derailed or
Hmm.
getting distracted. Every kid behaves differently depending on their temperament. So sometimes they'll get distracted, sometimes they will slow down, sometimes they will forget most of the things.
Hmm.
So all of that is happening, and then
Hmm.
you have this particular, so they have a they're doing a particular thing which is going to annoy you, which is going to test you, and then you'll have a reaction to it, right? You're like,
Yeah.
I've told you hundreds of times and still this is happening. That is the kind of reaction. Some parents yell, some parents like end up doing the thing for the child, right? So we all have
Yeah.
reactions,
Hmm.
and all we need to do is really just notice that we're getting into that reaction, because that reaction will then again get a reaction from the child also.
Hmm.
Internally, they are learning something which is really not working well for them. What they're learning internally is that if I just slow down enough, it's going to work. If I just, you know, if I stay distracted, there's no need for me to change anything.
Hmm.
It's not conscious. It's unconscious, right?
Hmm.
But understand that loop, because without it, you will not be able to change the way things are going. Does that make
Definitely. I
sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, Megha, and we do see it practically also happening, right? That
Yeah.
the moment you are kind of on that loop, nothing seems to be working, right? So I do understand that we need to take a step back and see how we can probably rephrase our own reactions and the way we want to set those boundaries and to get things done in those boundaries. Yes, excellent point. Now, that brings me to this entire gamut of the so-called external influences, right? Like, you cannot be a helicopter parent, you cannot be with your child 24/7, yet there are just so many influences around the child, right? So as a parent, I feel building that character in the child is very important to distinguish and to know, right, how to be aware of other people's needs, be it their friends, peers, etc., etc., and also how to draw the line at a lot of levels, right? So how do you ensure that you are raising an emotionally intelligent and resilient child? Because at the end of the day, we are in the AI world, right? And like, I'll just share a very small, teeny tiny example. So, my daughter had homework last year on Sanyukt Parivar. It was a
Hmm.
Hindi assignment on Sanyukt Parivar. Okay. So, how much ever I tried to explain to her, she's like, I want to do my research. Now, research meant she took help of AI, and there were some things that she jotted down, like she made her own segments out of it, etc. And then she wanted to take a printout of that and go to school. Now, there was no reasoning with her. She's like, when it is already done, why should I redo it, right? Now, it's a small
Hmm.
example. How do you explain to the child the importance of doing something on your own, using your own head, not be dependent on that AI, even though research these days typically ends up being just asking AI, putting things together and submitting it as your work in school, right? So now
Hmm.
this is a very small example. There are a lot of other influences, teens,
Yeah.
pre-teenage, teenage, etc., etc. Kids are growing up. So as parents, what can you do to ensure that the foundation is so strong that they're able to take care of themselves?
Mm, mm, mm. So, to your point about her wanting to take the printout and going to school, to some
Hmm.
extent, I feel like that is an accountability that needs to come from school, where,
Hmm.
I think a lot of schools are doing this check where, is the content, created by AI, right? So that can't be an assignment that you use. So I feel like to some
Hmm.
extent it's from the school, because not all of it we can enforce, ourselves. So I feel like those are conversations that, schools also need to start having, or parents need to start having with their teachers. um and coming back to, like, we spoke about the loops, and I'm going to get into this part of it, and I feel like they're all connected in the
Hmm.
end. So, for example, your child doesn't want to do a certain thing,
Hmm.
okay? Or let's say they had a difficult
Hmm.
moment in school.
Hmm.
They come back home and they tell you, Mama, I sat alone for lunch today. And your heart breaks, and immediately you want to
Hmm.
be like, oh my God, Bacha, don't worry about, how sweet you are. Maybe they don't see it yet, but you are the best. It's so lovely to spend time with you. You're like the best friend that, they can have, but maybe they don't know it right now. So all of those, reassurances that come out. And
Hmm.
what I want to say is, what we need to really think about is, if you pause and allow them to feel that pain or the sadness or the sorrow,
Hmm.
which very honestly our generation is not trained on. So it's a job, it's a skill that we are developing as we go, right?
Yeah.
So realistically, it's not something that comes naturally, and I think
Hmm.
we're all practicing it. But the key here is, when they're feeling it and you are with them, The
mm,
resilience is being built in that moment because you did
mm,
not take the child out of that moment. You just let them feel it. So
mm,
that's a very small, example, but true resilience really comes from being able to move through that
mm,
discomfort, move through that, whatever feeling is going on, right? So that's emotional resilience in small moments that we can
mm,
build.
mm,
But apart from that, yes, we also need to have conversations with them. I have had the longest conversations with my now 14-year-old because I feel like she was, with that curve growing up, as things started to move and change and social media and phone, you know, um,
mm,
access and all of that. So I used to have really long conversations with her about, YouTube, influencers, and more importantly, ask questions. Because what we want to do is develop their ability to think critically. We don't want to
mm.
tell them this is not good, this is not okay. We want to tell them, what do you think about it? Do you feel like influencers, have the right information? Do you feel like, they are the ones interpreting it right? Like whatever makes them think about those things as well. So I feel like that critical thinking is something we really need to bring in as well.
I think you've raised a very important point, critical thinking, right? Not in this era of influencer marketing, it is, they are just so gullible also at a lot of levels, right? Because when you're seeing it in a video, it's very believable. And not to mention all the AI generated contents that's doing the rounds. So it becomes very difficult somehow to balance as well, right? Where I'm heading with this is how do we balance restriction versus trust building? Because you mentioned social media and access, etc. But
Yeah.
there is just so much content out there which may not be age appropriate, and you don't know how to restrict that. So, how do you build that zone with the child? And it is not just for social media, even otherwise, how do you build that zone where not everything has to come from the space of restriction, but more from being able to trust your child to make the right decisions?
Mm, mm. So I'm reminded of how these conversations have to change at every stage. So
Hmm.
let's say your 14-year-old or your 16-year-old already has access to like 10 different things and they have a certain way of looking at it. Now,
Hmm.
when you go in with your ideas of how it should be,
Hmm.
most likely what's actually going to happen is a trust breakdown. And this is something I've personally, experienced as well as professionally seen because you are coming from a very different place. So I
Hmm.
think it's a tough job to do, but what we need to do is start from where they are at already. If
Hmm.
your child is already, looking at like 10 different things and you go in from like, YouTube in the first place is not even good enough, or, we all tend to make these statements or we tend
Hmm.
to have these reactions to the, and the minute we do that, the child is like, oh my God, my control is being taken away. I don't trust my parent to understand what I want, and the disconnection happens. So, these little things where we need to hold them close because we don't want them to think that we don't get where they're coming from. And it's a
Hmm.
tough job. So, because it's going to change based on the age. If your child is 9, you're going to react differently. You're going to have maybe a little bit more educational thing. For a
Hmm.
teen, maybe more critical thinking questions and, getting really curious about their world. Because if you get disconnected from it, you're not going to have the influence that you want to have with them,
Hmm.
right? So even conversations about restrictions, that
Hmm.
will come if you have created some level of trust and connection. Then you have
Hmm.
the conversation about, this feels, not so great to me. This feels like, too much to me. And then, kind of arrive at something together. Because that's
Hmm.
what, will really work because, the child was also on board.
Yeah. Hmm. Sounds simple, but yes, requires tactful navigation, is what I would say. So, I totally understand what you are trying to say. But what's more important, according to you, control or capability building in the child? Like,
Are you talking about parental control or are you
yeah,
talking about, yeah,
parental control versus capability building in the child.
we don't have control, do we? To some extent. We
At
have the
least
idea.
let's
Yes.
live in the illusion that we do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, we come from control because we are worried, we are
Hmm.
anxious,
Hmm.
It happens with me all the time. I think every parent, tends to get anxious. That's why I say that we need to work within ourselves first, because we
Hmm.
need to bring in the understanding that this is where things are at, and I'm going to navigate to something
Hmm.
better. Okay, you can
Hmm.
always take like 5 steps ahead, but if you try to take like 100 steps at one
Hmm.
time because you're anxious, that just makes
Hmm.
things worse. So I feel like control comes from fear, and whatever the situation might be, whatever things are at, our kids are the ones who are going to live this future that is getting created. They're going to be the ones who are going to be part of creating that future. So we need to
Hmm.
figure out what is the foundational blocks that we want to have. So obviously, it's not fear or anxiety, right? And building capability in a child is I feel like the most crucial thing, and really letting them be in that moment, understanding,
Hmm.
teaching them how to move through discomfort, because
Hmm.
frustration tolerance, this is a word that we all need to be familiar with. They have lower frustration tolerance, right? It shows up in homework, it shows up
Yeah.
in when something is not working how it's supposed to, or it shows up when you put on a movie maybe which is too slow for them, right? Like, for example, because they are
Yeah.
on a different, in a, but building that little by little
Hmm.
in everyday situations is going to give them that edge over the other kids who are going to be, growing
Hmm.
up,
Hmm.
not having that frustration tolerance, right?
Hmm.
So capability, super crucial. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes. Tell me something. As parents, we have this instinctive urge to rescue our child. Like you gave the example of, oh, I had my lunch alone, right? It comes very intuitively, very instinctively as a parent, right? Now, how do you navigate that? Because the first reaction is that, and on the hindsight, you may think differently in different situations, for different situations, but instinctively you always run towards helping your child out, right? So yes, Ruchi shares that. So true, resilience is the key life skill needed to be shared. And thank you, Bliss Path Yoga, great parenting tips. Yeah. So as a parent, how do you limit your urge to rescue your child and to empower them to navigate their own world?
The minute you realize that there is a reaction happening, there is distance from the feeling already.
Hmm.
Just like mindfulness or anything else that you might have done to ground yourself or, be connected with yourself. The minute you realize that I am having a reaction, it's like
Hmm.
this. I'm reminded of my child trying to
Hmm.
jump from this place in the playground, okay, which is pretty high. But she was
Hmm.
feeling pretty confident about doing it. And I know that some kids have done it, so I know it's doable. But I
Hmm.
have a huge fear in that moment. I can literally feel it in my knees, okay? So, what would I do in that moment? I would choose not to project that fear on the kid.
Hmm.
Sometimes I have literally looked away, because I don't want her to pick on my fear and then
Hmm.
decide what's doable for her,
Yeah.
right? So it's like that metaphorical looking away, or metaphorically being like, I'm going to resist the urge. Just here for a minute, little by little, I'm going to resist the urge to just go in and make them feel better, to just go in and do it for them, or any of those things that we have those reactions to, even the urge to yell, even the urge
Hmm.
to shout, right?
Hmm.
Because that again tells the child that, okay, the first, second, third reminder was not important, only the fourth
Hmm.
one where she is shouted is important. So even that urge to
Huh.
really use your power and push and energy and yelling to get them to move, that's a loop that we are stuck in.
Yeah. So I think Megha, this has been really interesting. It's 6:58, last 2 minutes, so I will take up any questions. So if there are any questions, please put them up on the screen. All right. So Bliss Path Yoga. Okay, Ruchi has a question. Do you believe parent can be friends to their children in your experience?
So I've heard this somewhere that you can be a friend to your child, but I feel like the other way around is something you have to be very careful about, because we cannot use them as the emotional, sort of sponge where you're like kind of just unloading things on them. Um, but the other way around, yes, of course, I feel like you're always juggling, or always doing that role of being a friend and then being the person who's the authority.
Yeah. All right. So there are little comments I'll read out. Bliss Path Yoga says it happens as a parent, our fears being projected on kids. We can't see our kids struggling. Yes, that is something we all resonate with. So that's quite true and very relatable. And Megha, I just want to say one thing, that it has been really interesting talking to you today. It makes me feel I am, whatever my feelings and my emotions as a parent are, it's relatable, nothing wrong.
Yeah.
I just need to stay the course and navigate this territory with this thing. And I just want to say to all our audience today that if this conversation made you rethink even one thing, about your parenting strategy, that's a powerful start, because future ready kids aren't raised by perfect parents, guys, but aware ones. And as long as we are aware of what we are trying to do and achieve, I think we'll be on the right track. Having said that, I am a strong believer in keeping screens out as much as possible, as long as possible. So let's pledge to restrict that in our kids' lives. But I know it's a necessary evil also these days. So let's do that. But reach out to Megha in case you have any questions, put them out in the chat, and we'll respond to it even after the live. Right, Megha?
Yes, sounds good. Yes, please leave your questions, comments, and really, yeah, whatever your experiences have been, because I feel like when you realize you're not alone, it just takes the
Yeah.
load off, right? So, yeah,
All
that'd be
right.
great.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lovely having you, Megha. And guys, do like, share, and subscribe. Hen.India. We bring amazing conversations every week. The subjects are very varied. And we would also love to listen from you about any other particular topic that you want us to cover. And we would try and bring that conversation. We have also put Megha's LinkedIn link in the chat. So feel free to connect with Megha in case you need any parenting guidance. Thank you so much, Megha.
Thank you.